It's just one weekend, but for wounded soldiers now living with disabilities and the painful memories of what they experienced, a weekend of fishing was just the mission they needed.
And the Wounded Warriors weekend in Nipawin brought more than 100 veterans from across North America together to experience world-class fishing, golfing, and camaraderie. The event also brought to light an issue that soldiers call the silent bullet, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Tonight, the first part of our is Teena Monteleone's story on how one weekend of fishing became a huge part of the rehabilitation process for these wounded warriors.
For these soldiers and dozens of volunteers, the day starts bright and early. But when headed for some world-class fishing in Saskatchewan, nobody is complaining.
I believe we're going after walleye and northern pike. I've not caught either of them, but you know, I'm used to catching little fish about this big. These are going to be some really good fish.
Over 100 soldiers from Canada and the United States are headed for a weekend of fishing and golf in Nipawin. It's part of a coalition between WoundedWarriors.ca and the Wounded Warriors Project in the United States. The organizations provide support to wounded service members to help them rehabilitate and transition back to civilian life. This weekend was the brainchild of country singers Blake Emmons and Jim CHUTE.
Wounded Warriors started out at a campfire last fall with Blake Emmons and I. We do a lot of campfires. We sing songs and write songs and play guitars. And Blake just said, you know what I'd like to do? He's a vet himself. You know, there's some of my wounded buddies that I'd just love to bring them up fishing. You know, maybe a half a dozen of them. And from there, it absolutely mushroomed.
A motorcade from Saskatoon to Nipawin welcomed those who survived their military service but came home a different person to their families. Many of these soldiers were injured in Iraq or Afghanistan or while training, and they continue their fight at home, trying to rehabilitate and find steady jobs and a steady state of mind. One day, some of these wounded soldiers may be well enough to return to active duty. Others will be released from the forces.
You know, when I received 7 gunshot wounds, and I healed in 30 days. Perfectly young and fit, but PTSD, I think of every gamut of emotions from happy to sad to angry, and you're not in control, and I think that's the most important. You're never in control anymore, and you feel like you're alone.
That helpless feeling was lifted with every cast thrown into the waters of Tobin Lake, a goal organizers set months ago. The work of organizing and fundraising for the nearly $200,000 weekend was nothing compared to the price some of these wounded warriors have had to pay. Wayne Watson from Saskatoon was driving his truck across Canada when he heard about the Wounded Warriors weekend and offered to volunteer his boat.
I think it's just a huge honor to be involved in being able to give back to those that give so much to us. It's overwhelming. The stories that we've heard today on the media boat, it just brings a tear to your eye every time. Yeah. It's just a huge, huge event.
Sergeant First Class Mark Dervais was on his 3rd combat tour with the United States Army in September of 2009. While responding to a distress call in Afghanistan, his vehicle was ambushed. The first rocket that came through the windshield also took off his arm.
It was tough to keep things under control, and I was in a leadership position, so I still had to push forward and realize that a lot of people still depended on me to, you know, for guidance and leadership. So I tried not to show the emotional strain that I was under at the time.
That emotional strain led to something many of the soldiers here are suffering, PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder.
Everyone has their limits of being able to deal with certain things, and you know, some of those guys have went past that limit, and now they have to fight that battle every day. Mm-hmm. And there's levels of severity, I think, with PTSD, and it comes and goes.
Dervais says the problem is many of these soldiers won't ask for help when they need it. In part 2 of this story, these wounded warriors reveal more about their thoughts on post-traumatic stress disorder and how this weekend of fishing became a huge part of their rehabilitation process. Teena Monteleone, CTV News, Nipawin.